Ouch.
To examine the fundamental flaw of Nickelodeon is to look inwardly and try to determine how the curator really felt about the process. I can't say with certainty whether this was a daunting task or not, but either way, the whole philosophy of this thing was so messy. We as an audience don't know why this was made, or the full brainstorming process, or even how much passion was really poured into it. In a sense, that's quantifiable by the people who helped put it together. All we can do is go by what we see and make educated assumptions as to what went down. Now, looking inwardly, I can harken back to points where Enter was at his lowest, when he would come into videos downtrodden, wounded, negatively introspective, and drained by anything around him. Certain points itself being harder to listen to than others, but there was a quiet sense of push through that he'd given, even when he was telling us he was at his wit's end or right on the edge of something disastrous. Even when he was pretty much set to give up, there was always something else for him on the horizon. I mean, no cap, this man has gone through some shit, and it would have been so easy to throw in the towel at any point. I don't think anyone would have blamed him either. But even in his darkest spots, he felt the need to shift in the midst of the darkest storm to make for a brighter rainbow at the end of it all.
I can't change the past. I understand this. What I did, I will always have did. What I've been, I will always have been. But I want to be a better person than that. I think that I am a better person. And I believe that I am finding my way upward, slowly but surely.
In going through his past stuff, I do find moments like this poetic, and him continuing to push out content at his best moments easily lives up to that standard. Even if people don't really know what Mr. Enter lives by or wants to do or even is anymore. The one thing you can probably always pin to his character is his strong sense of resilience. Not exactly bold and brash, but silent and passionate. He's passionate about continuing on, and he's passionate about doing what he thinks is right. Now, taking this whole event into account, Nickelodeon feels downright antithetical to the whole body of Enter. I have a sense that this wasn't made to just prioritize a bunch of fun reviews about Nickelodeon's lineup. Not like that's an inherent issue anyway, but beyond his personal reasons why he did it, the writing's on the wall, because 9 times out of 10, the passion was not reflected in the reviews. Sure, Enter might be irritated or screaming or dripping with sarcasm, but if you take a moment to read between the lines and analyze what he tries to say through many of these, you'll find nothing. You wouldn't have learned anything new about production, or you wouldn't have gained any narrative insight or come away with any cool mantras or anything. It'd be one thing if he was just saying the same things over and over again, but it's a whole other to have nothing emotionally behind anything that he's saying.
Alright, let's talk about Nickelodeon and Nickelodeon as a whole, shall we? Have I been negative at times? Absolutely. Maybe even at points undeservedly so. That might be because I decided to marathon everything all at once. I'm still trying to decide whether or not this was a good idea. Time will tell on that one.
This is peak Enter apathy. A lot of the times the emotional impact a work has on you does push you to do your due diligence and push out a product to pay homage or to eviscerate it for all time. Like, some of these cartoons have been on his radar for the better part of a decade, and he has nothing new or informed to say about him, or a new way to recontextualize his old thoughts. I know these were written in bulk like a month before this thing even started, but hell, with a bit more emotional drive, he could have started 4, 6, even a full year before this was planned. If this had resonated with him more than it did, he could have rewritten some stuff or come up with custom assets or a true narrative or something. Anything that'd keep people from referring to it as the poor man's knickknacks. But what did he do with this series? Nothing. Ostensibly, the theming is arbitrary, but it's the only thing signifying this as a big happening for this channel. It's a bunch of reviews strung together. That's it. It's not even the full original Nicktoon slate as he promised. So, to me, its combined emotional impact is null, even with all the mind-blowing, wrong, or fucked up parts about this being made. Like, yeah, I hated plenty of the coverage given, but it'll have no net impact on me, and I'm gonna move on from this and make more of my own shit. Unfortunately, his fans went through a hell of a lot more strife over the course of this marathon. Now, I don't imagine most people even getting past the first entry, but if you did, I assume that you'll know of Enter's late January Twitter exit. Now, understandably, getting shit on for eons is no fun, and the deletion of his account and subsequent journal did adequately voice his frustration. That said, instead of trying to look inward and at least address some criticisms, he turned around, he dropped trow, and he mooned the whole audience from that point forward. He showed his ass in every one of these replies and refutations while not identifying anything people were saying. It was just masterful disrespect. To be fair, he's Mr. Enter. I'm sure he's aware of his reputation, so maybe this is more of an inevitability than anything. That being said, it just feels wrong to talk down to and venomously downplay people's genuine concerns, doubly if these people come to bat for you anytime you produce. I'm not saying his only option was to kiss ass and legally marry all of his supporters. Far from it, in fact. We know damn well not everyone that likes him has his best interests at heart, but anything would have been better than nothing. In lies the crux of the problem, right? Everyone was offered nothing to watch, nothing to justify shitty or inaccurate claims in the videos, and nothing to really work with after the fact. He gave nothing, and people had to live with that for 3 straight months. And that feeling, it encapsulates the show that he most fervently accuses of being a big old pile of nothing. The cosmic irony of the Bunsen is a Beast review. The Bunsen review itself was the apex of stock enterism. It is a lot of the problems the previous entries did, and it's his trademark complaints that are amplified. The Tough Puppy segment could have retroactively addressed at least a third of his gripes, but aside from that, if you've seen one overly negative Nickorama, you've basically seen them all. He rides it for the voice acting, sound design, animation, and art style, Butch's philosophy, and all that. I don't think he even really got to the story. He begrudgingly said that the animation for the show was decent, admitting it looked better than season 10 of Fairly Odd Parents, despite the fact that the digitally animated set of episodes using the exact same studio and the exact same pipeline and the exact same techniques looked the same. Doesn't the crossover kind of exemplify that? I mean, all the characters are on screen at the same time. He doesn't even get anything out of it comedically, obviously, but he justifies it by talking about a general degradation of Butch's skills. I mean, modern Butch on his own, even at Nick, was not his strongest self. But it's generally the same shit we've gotten for 20 years. It's just a weaker package. It's nothing to write home about, but there was no drastic change within Butch to justify this. Then he goes on a tear about Butch Hartman's declining sense of skill and how him pandering to kids created this monstrosity. Which, again, nothing's changed. Also, isn't the whole running narrative with modern Butch is that he's a raging egotist that lacks self-awareness? Them kids weren't the endgame. He didn't care enough about him to pander directly to him. Pretty much all his cartoon pitches are gaggy ideas that allow him to make quick and dirty puns and quips. In a way, they're eye-roll worthy, but they can be a bit more variable than stuff he made for TV. This attempt at a historical narrative popped up a few times in Nickorama, using certain shows as milestones to talk about where Nick was as a company. That was a major part of the Monsters vs. Aliens review, in fact, coming from a guy who couldn't even be bothered to watch the movie for greater context, let alone more than a couple episodes of the show. A lot of his historical analysis was hyper-emotional drivel based on heavy speculation and a string of loose observations. Related to that, he tried to discuss Nick's horrible proclivity to use standout creators in his network to make new shows. Spooky. He acts as if utilizing the same talent or creative brain trust gets you nowhere, when in reality, to network of selection like this, that leads to some of the most beloved and respected cartoons of the past decade. Even if we're speaking from the perspective of just using one creator, I don't know how well that still holds up. If anything, cartoon creators do move on to bigger and better things each time they make something. People like Gendy, Craig, Dan, Swampy, they all managed to innovate each time they got a new green light. If we're speaking about the very specific and unusual terms of the same creator staying with the same network to make the same shows, then we also gotta take into account why Nick themselves kept him on board. Creators have immense power, but at the end of the day, it's the executives that have the final say. They pick these people because they trust that their creative visions generally line up well with the networks. More likely than not, they did influence the humor and the story and these other elements to be more streamlined. Enter insists that in past Nickeloramas there was a curse, a spooky curse, among Nickelodeon creators that pertains to them losing their mojo as time goes on. As if to say that if one person makes more than a couple shows with varying premises and ways of executing, that shit's automatically cursed. Fuck character development. Shit's cursed, man. Yeah, I don't know when correlation and causation became equal, but I know that still doesn't check out. He also insists that the main premise of the show is unworkable, despite it being a very typical take on the fish out of water story that runs rampant in kids shows with varying execution. I don't know, this review was peak old man yelling at clouds. It'd be, quote unquote, one of those shows made to piss him off, and I think this episode is most notable for showcasing the lack of separation in personal bias and critical perception. This isn't the most defensible Nicktoon of the lot by all means, but for real, it feels like there's so much less holding this one together than the others. It's one of those cartoons anyone can just write off as mediocre in most cases, but Enter has to dig his heels into the sand without justifying the resistance. He picks on basically everything that can be easily explained or justifiable by common answers, instead of just saying, "This show doesn't work for me." He'll go on a tear about how this show works for no one. Again, it's not the strongest show, but these critiques contrast against it are the most weak sauce arguments you could throw out, and the resulting effect is null. There's nothing there, there's no meat on that bone. Like, even a few years ago, if you got the same spiel, I could imagine the shit at least being entertaining. Subjective to an extent, but considering how tired and dated the arguments that these are, there's nothing you cited for Bunsen that you couldn't have heard in a past Nickorama. Maybe that's to be expected because it's one of the last few on the list, but either way, I can't imagine Mouse getting something out of this. Hell, I could apply some of his complaints to his reviews, it wouldn't change a damn thing. Watch. His voice acting is annoying. It seems to be stuck in 3 phases of monotony, and when it doesn't grate on the ears, it grates on my psyche. The writing is horrendous. It's repetitive cliché schlock that everyone's seen and heard before, and it doesn't have anything to show for itself. The written structure is all over the place, but not as egregious as the wavering quality of his footage. Oh, even between shots, the thing changes. That is just unacceptable. What were those animators thinking? There's no musical score, and the sound design feels empty and lifeless outside of Jonathan's loud ramblings. And by the way, where are the morals? Yeah, picking on a bunch of defenseless cartoons really makes you an upstanding citizen. Bravo, man. I really gotta hand it to you. I can't believe the writers actually went there. I'm disgusted. Disgusting. I don't know if you got anything out of that, but cumulatively speaking, I know I wouldn't have gotten anything out of it if I just repeated that ad nauseum for over an hour. I can feel the repetitive nature of this phrase weighing on the script's legitimacy. I mean, the script itself is probably running in circles at this point, but if that doesn't tell you how much of nothing this was, I don't really know what will.